Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are questions for Admiral Flynn and Director Manno. You were both present in your respective positions in the run-up to the millennium. My first question for you is this: Did you have procedures in place for enhancing the security measures at airports or otherwise when there would be a security alert? Did you have the ability to ratchet up the policies and procedures for security before people boarded aircraft?
Yes.
In the period just before the millennium, when the entire government was on alert about the possibility of a terrorist act in the United States, did you take any steps to increase security measures or enhance security measures in our airports or pre-boarding?
We had, in the entire baseline effort was directed towards that.
I don't understand the answer. In the period,
from the period of 96 through 2000, we were working all the time to improve the effectiveness of pre-board screening.
but you just said that you did have the capacity to ratchet up
Yes.
security measures, and I'm asking, in the period prior to the millennium when the entire government was on alert,
Right.
did you put in place those enhanced measures?
They were in place. We did not, that I recall, other than when Rassam was caught. Then we did some additional specific information. But I don't recall SDs that we did in that period because we were strengthening the basic program to deal with that.
So just so I understand it, after Rassam was caught and we knew that there was an attempt to infiltrate this country, that specifically airports were being targeted, did you or did you not take any additional measures beyond the measures that had been in place before he was caught to strengthen security in aviation?
I don't recall putting out SDs at that time. I recall very definitely that what we did with regard to Rassam's thing is I've made everyone aware of what a bomb made with the materials that he had would look like. And we did that even before I was aware that LAX was on his mind.
So, in other words, your response was to disseminate specific information, but not to do things like look at carry-ons, inspect carry-ons, which you weren't routinely doing, or look for additional names to put on the no-fly list, or anything else that might relate to aviation security.
We were routinely and with increased emphasis looking at carry-ons.
You were inspecting the insides of carry-ons, or you were screening carry-ons?
Both.
On a routine basis, you were looking on the inside of carry-ons
No,
prior?
we had a continuous opening and search regime. That was, in effect, was a random. And then additionally, when there was any indication in an X-ray requiring that there was something dangerous there, that required opening. All electronic items and on a random basis, additionally, there was trace explosive detection.
So when someone set off a magnetometer, was their bag routinely opened? Their carry-on bag?
No.
When they set off the magnetometer twice, was their bag open?
Not unless there was some indication in the bag, or if something dangerous was determined was taken off the person, then there had to be additional scrutiny of the bag if there was cause to suspect this person.
So when you answered my question a minute ago, I asked you whether there were enhanced procedures that you could utilize when there was a specific security alert. You said yes. What were those procedures? What would you do when there was a security alert, when you were essentially going to orange from yellow, although we didn't have color coding at the time?
Well, one could require, for example, searches of vehicles at the front of the terminal. One could require the stopping of parking within a certain range of the terminal. It could require additional searches of people on the basis of some indication of that would come to you that they were naval aviators from Philadelphia or whatever.
In the spring and summer of 2001, and I guess this would be a question for Mr. Manno, you were aware, were you not, of the heightened security warnings that were going out through the government?
We put out warnings during that time frame as well to
Did
our
you
customers.
Did you consider at that time increasing the security measures in the way that Admiral Flynn has just described to meet this enhanced security threat?
Well, it was not the role of the Office of Intelligence to direct security measures. Our role was to try to the extent that we could to identify the threats and then provide that information to the aviation policy and operations folks to determine whether or not measures should be increased. There were efforts that were made, going back to the Rassam example. There was a mad effort to try to figure out what he was actually up to. In fact, one of the things that was done was that our explosives unit looked at what was actually seized and tried to figure out, okay, with these types of explosives, these types of timers, what sort of device could be constructed to target civil aviation. And then based on that information, the possibility that having those components, what could be done, we sent out an information circular to sensitize screeners and the airlines to that potential threat.
But you had, turning back to the spring and summer of 2001, we have heard testimony and we have ample evidence that that across the intelligence community, literally, hair was on fire from June through the summer, and even going back a little bit before June, but through the spring and through the summer, a high state of alert.
Let me try again. It started with the World Trade Center. It continued with USAF's efforts out in the Pacific, and it continued with the information that we've been talking about, the various interests of the UBL in attacking us. And in 96, 97, we hammered out an elevated baseline. We had been going back and forth with security directives with occasional spikes in security and then bringing them down. We said, no, we get it up to this level. And our effort in those times of undetermined but probably higher threat, what's happening with the millennium? Well, we don't really know what's going to happen in the millennium, but something can happen. What you do in those circumstances, what I did in those circumstances, was to increase surveillance on all of the inspection activities and to increase awareness in the form of putting out ICs and meetings with the security directors and meetings with the airlines and meetings with the airports to say we need to be on our toes.
So the additional measures, you could and did take additional measures when there was a high level of security alert. Is that correct?
No, the baseline was meant to deal with a elevated level of security.
So you did not have additional. I am terribly confused here. Now, please excuse me. I asked you the question whether you had additional measures that you could take, that you had. I understand you feel that you were operating from a high baseline.
Right.
I asked you, did you have additional measures that you could take? And the measures could be anything from sending out directives to engaging with airport security personnel, to engaging directly with the airlines, to changing the modalities like searching and getting additional names for the no-fly list. There's a panoply of things that you could do above the baseline. I'm asking a pretty straightforward question. Did you have measures that you could use when there was a heightened period of alert? Yes or no?
Yes.
In the period prior to the millennium, after Rassam was apprehended, and it was clear in what is already public and certainly in what we know from classified briefings, that the entire government was on alert, that there was tracking of people who meant to do harm in this country, and that some of that harm was focused on our airlines and our aircraft. Did you take additional measures at that time to secure the airlines?
Did not impose, that I recall, additional specific measures.
You did not?
Not that I recall. I may be wrong about
Right.
that.
In the spring and summer of 2001, when, as our briefings and our testimony to us have indicated, the hair of the intelligence community was on fire, given the nature of the warnings that we were getting. Not specific as to what would happen, but that something was about to happen. A, were you aware of those warnings? And I guess you were gone by then. Is that right, Admiral Flynn? So I'll put that question to Director Manno. Were you aware of that state of affairs?
Yes, and as I said, we also issued information circulars regarding those.
Did you advise or advocate any further steps than issuing the directives or security circulars that you issued?
Again, the role of intelligence is to provide the intelligence and not to direct or make specific security recommendations.
And we don't have, I'm limited here because I don't have in front of me Admiral Flynn's successor, so I'll turn to Ms. Garvey. Did you consider taking any additional security steps in the spring and summer of 2001 in response to the heightened security warnings?
I know we put out additional security directives, and I'd have to go back and look and see specifically if there were additional measures that were included, and we can do that and provide that for the record. But you're absolutely right. We were aware of increased activity, had been briefed directly by Admiral Flynn's successor on the concern, and that is reflected both in the security directives and in the information circulars. If I also could, just to go back to Y2K for a moment, or to the millennium, and again, I'll provide for the record, or ask the FAA and TSA to provide for the record specifically if any directives went out or intelligence circulars went out at that time. I can tell you that there were any number of meetings across the administration, across DOT, that involved the FAA and the industry about concerns related both to safety and security. The Department of Transportation had a couple of tabletop exercises that I participated in, and the principal focus, obviously, was to make sure that we had the measures in place, that we had that we were doing everything we possibly could.
And this occurred in the run-up to the millennium, is that correct?
This occurred in the run-up to the millennium.
And were there analogous meetings across the government at a very high level with industry tabletops, as you were describing, in the spring and summer of 2001?
I can't say for certainty that there were. My understanding is that there were. I know that at the Department of Transportation, we certainly were engaged in that, as well as a very direct communication on a, I don't want to say a daily basis, but certainly a weekly basis with members of the industry.
But you were, you were the administrator at both times, correct?
Yes, that's correct, Commissioner.
Okay, and you remember doing what you just described in the run-up to the millennium, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you have a similar specific recollection of your involvement in the spring and summer of 2001?
No, I do not, Commissioner. No tabletop exercises. 2000 and 2001, what I remember more specifically would be the intelligence briefings I would get from my own internal intelligence people.
Can you compare the intensity of your agency's response to the intelligence that you were getting in the end of 1999 with the intensity of your agency's response in the spring and summer of 2001?
Well, certainly Y2K, there was an intensity because it was a deadline that we knew was looming. It was a deadline that was there, and it had enormous implications even from a safety perspective, or at least we were concerned that it might. I think the intensity that you described was probably in the summer of 2000. And 2001, particularly 2001, certainly I had a concern based on what I was hearing. I think the great frustration, and I understand the Commissioner's frustration with the statement, credible and reliable, and I don't want to, I understand the frustration with that phrase, but on the other hand, I think to some degree the security people are feeling the same thing today. You want to do the right thing, but you want to have enough information so that you're acting appropriately. You're not either putting measures in place that are inappropriate, beyond, or may not be dealing with the real threat at hand.
Rather than rely then on your impressionistic recollections of what you did, I would request for the record that we receive from you and from your former colleagues at the FAA a detailed description of the actions that were taken at the end of 1999 and a detailed description of the actions that were taken in the spring and summer of 2001. Thank you.